US President-elect Donald Trump has declared a fentanyl war against China. He announced a big move on Monday, announcing that he will be imposing an additional 10% tariff on imports from China. Why? Well, he claims it's in response to Beijing's failure to control the trafficking of the chemical precursors used to make fentanyl. First, what is fentanyl? In case you're wondering, it's basically a deadly synthetic opioid. Trump claimed that he has had talks with China about fentanyl being sent into the US, but to no avail. Not just that, he said that he was promised harsh penalties for drug dealers, but claims that Beijing never followed through. So what does China have to say about Trump's move? No surprises here, China disputes this narrative. A spokesperson for China's foreign ministry fired back saying, I'm quoting, China is one of the toughest nations on counter-narcotics, both in policy and practice, quote unquote. The Chinese government says that the fentanyl issue is largely a US problem. Yet, they have extended help in addressing it. But is this truly about the drugs, or is this yet another example of Trump using tariffs like a weapon? After all, he's often said his favorite word is tariff, calling it the most beautiful word in the dictionary. On Monday, Trump took things further, unveiling 25% tariffs on goods from China, Mexico and Canada. And while the 10% China tariff is lower than the 60% that he threatened during his campaign, the rationale behind it has raised eyebrows. He claims it's tied to China's role in America's opioid epidemic, particularly fentanyl. But what's the truth? What's really going on here? Let's start off with the basics. Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid far stronger than heroin. It has legitimate medical uses for pain relief. However, it's also at the center of America's opioid crisis. As per reports, last year alone, nearly 75,000 Americans died of fentanyl overdose. The White House calls fentanyl a scourge without boundaries. Experts have described America's fentanyl crisis as the most lethal drug epidemic in human history. So how exactly does China fit into the fentanyl crisis in America? According to reports, fentanyl started arriving in the US from China about 10 years ago. In 2020, the US Drug Enforcement Administration called China the primary source of fentanyl and fentanyl-related substances trafficked through international mail. Authorities in both the US and China have cracked down on traffickers and criminal gangs. However, as the crackdowns intensified, traffickers changed tactics. Much of that flow has been rerouted through cartels in Mexico. Now, instead of sending fentanyl directly to the US, chemicals are shipped to Mexico, where they are in turn processed into fentanyl and then smuggled across the border, which brings us to the crucial question: what has China done to address this? Well, it hasn't been all inaction. In 2019, China took a major step, scheduling all forms of fentanyl as controlled substances. That's something even the US has not done permanently, but cooperation faltered in 2022. This was after the then Speaker of the House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi, visited Taiwan, causing quite a stir in China. In retaliation, Beijing cut off various ties with the US, including joint counter-narcotics efforts. Last year, in fact, talks resumed during a Biden-Xi meeting in San Francisco. And since then, China has reportedly taken steps to control fentanyl precursors and worked on anti-money laundering operations targeting criminal networks. Yet, China insists the fentanyl problem is fundamentally American. Last month, Mao Ning, a Chinese foreign ministry spokesperson, said that the root cause of overdoses lies within the US itself, saying that it's up to the US government to implement effective measures to curb the crisis. So here's the real question. Tariff might be a beautiful word, according to Trump, but can it really curb a public health crisis? Are tariffs really the answer? Clearly, there's more to all of this than meets the eye. By Wednesday morning, Chinese state media warned Trump that his pledge to slap additional tariffs on Chinese goods over fentanyl flows could drag the world's top two economies into a mutually destructive tariff war. Remember, during Trump's first term, a bitter trade war with China disrupted global supply chains, drove up inflation, and basically sent borrowing costs soaring. And now, with Trump's rhetoric heating up once again, Beijing is responding sharply. Editorials from Chinese state media outlets like China Daily and the Global Times issued warnings to the U.S. on Tuesday. What was their message? The next president must not scapegoat China for America's fentanyl crisis. In fact, one Chinese daily editorial even accused Trump of making unfounded claims to justify his tariff threats. But as China says, could a new wave of tariffs destabilize the global economy? Economists are already sounding the alarm. Here's what's at stake. China's $19 trillion economy is already feeling the pressure. Economists have started cutting their growth projections for 2025 and 2026, warning of far-reaching consequences if Trump pushes through his tariff promises. China appears ready for a fight, but is also sending signals of resilience. Some Chinese analysts have dismissed Trump's justification for tariffs as baseless. Trump's past tariffs, which ranged from 7.5% to 25% on Chinese goods, targeted $370 billion worth of imports. And now he's threatening rates as high as 60%. And this escalation could upend China's industrial sector, which exports over $400 billion in goods annually to the U.S. Adding fuel to the fire is Trump's choice of Jamieson Greer as the U.S. trade representative. A veteran of the first trade war, Greer is basically seen as a hardliner, ready to push an aggressive trade agenda. As for what all of this would mean for the global economy, economists are divided. While some argue that Beijing may need to inject stimulus to sustain growth, others point to the unpredictability of Trump's approach. So the question still remains, is this the dawn of a trade war 2.0? And if it is, how much pain are both countries and the world prepared to endure? To stay up to speed with the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.